All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, from wherever you are joining us from. Today, it's another session of our academic Q&A, the eighth in the series. And I remain your anchor, Dr. Saeed Olaide Jimo, and we'll be kickstarting the session right away. But before we dive into some of the questions you may have today, I want to take the first 5 to 10 minutes to talk about something that can actually benefit us generally, and hopefully that could also, spur some questions from you all. So, what I want to quickly talk about is something that has to do with how do we work collaboratively. In my career, I've come to realize that the people you actually work with matters a lot. And this is something that is very important because it kind of influences your level of thinking and how you perceive yourself. And I'll give two typical examples about this. So when I started my career, being, as a local scientist in Nigeria, so the access to resources to conduct research is very limited. I was very limited rather, and opportunity for mentorship uh, was not also, something that is, readily available. So as a result of that, how much I could do in terms of research, how much I can, collaborate as at then was very limited. But when I moved to the US in 2023 to start my postdoc at the University of Wyoming, then something happened. So when I joined the research team at Wyoming in Lockley Research Lab, so at some point, my advisor, told me that, okay, we'll be working on this project and we're going to be having collaborators, from across the world, and we'll be going to Germany, for a particular workshop. Deep in me, then he gave me some materials to read, at least for me as a person that just joined the lab. So, I saw papers published in very big journals like Science Advances, New Phytologist, at least journals that are very, reputable in our field. And, some names became very prominent, because I've been reading several papers and I see that a lot of people cite them. And that is what happens when your work is so exceptional in the field, a lot of people will cite you. So in November 2023, if I'm not mistaken, they went for the workshop at the German Center for Biodiversity Research in Germany. I had one feeling during one of the sessions there. It was just like I was in a round table sitting with many people that have read their papers that I also wish, to, kind of use them as a kind of mentor or, somebody you're looking up to in the field and be like, yeah, these people are inspiring me to do a lot. And now finding myself sitting in a round table with those people discussing research, it makes me feel like, wow, this is interesting. And that really blew my mind away in terms of how much, I could do in the field of ecology. And that singular experience was very very critical in helping me to actually develop high-level thinking in my field. And it also makes me feel like, well, if you can be in the same room with these people that are, well recognized, well understood, and well cited in the field, then the sky is your limit as well. So what is the point I'm trying to drive about is that networking and collaboration is something that is very important in research. But who are the people you are collaborating with? Are they people that would inspire you to be better in your field? Are they people that will always tell you that, no, you don't have to aim for a big journal, just, aim for a small journal, that is fine. But I also don't want you to get me wrong, because I'm not saying that you always have to publish in a very big journal. But what I'm trying to say is that whoever you are collaborating with can actually help widen the horizon of your thinking and also determine what kind of research you'll be contributing to. Do you just want to be replicating, research that has been done by others, or you also want to contribute to the leading edge of research in your field? I'm sure your answer will be the latter. So if that is the case, the kind of people you collaborate with matters in how far you are going to go in your research career. when you are able to collaborate with people that helps you to think better, people that helps you, that motivate you to try, and get published in places where you become well recognized, that is something. Towards that time, I also, submitted a paper to New Phytologist Journal, which is, a very big journal, a well-recognized journal in the field. Even though my paper did not scale through, but I also got an invitation to review for that journal. Do you understand? Because I was the lead author on the paper that I submitted. Of course, I was able to publish my journal, my paper elsewhere, which is also a well-recognized journal, Journal of Ecology. But, having the opportunity to submit to that journal also gave me some level of exposure that makes, that kind of push me out and be like, okay, this is also somebody, that can actually be, useful, that is potentially, a scholar in this field as well. So when you collaborate, try and make sure that you are collaborating with the right people. Try and make sure you are collaborating with people that would encourage you to be better, not people that will make you to settle for less. So I would try to wrap it up here for this first session and try to open up the floor for questions from participants. Thank you. And if you think this topic is relevant, please let me know using the React button. So I'll be able to know whether I've been able to communicate something that is relevant and useful to you. So the floor is open now. If you have questions, please bring them up. Yeah, I can see your reactions. Thank you. I'm seeing two hands up, so I'll call on Bashir Rabiu first.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for the topic that you just spoke about. So, following up on what you said, if I'm in that room in the future, how do I ask someone for mentorship guidance? Because some people are very busy, you're not sure how to approach them. So, my question is, what's the best way to approach them to get them to show you what they know?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you. Um, when you want to try to approach people that are top there, top ranking researchers to kind of work with them, you need to be able to explain why you want to work with them. For example, what is bringing you? If you only send a blanket message, or let me say a general message of, hey, I like your research and I'm interested in working with you, you probably will not get a response. But your inquiry or your introduction should come in a way that shows why you actually want to work with them. And what do I mean by the why? For example, is it that you have read one of their recent papers and you feel like, oh, they have done XYZ, but we can also consider ABC, which can actually deepen our insight or let us know more about this particular topic. So in that way, you want to be able to pitch that your idea to them and be like, hey, I actually came across your work where you studied XYZ. It was interesting that you found out ABC, but I also thought that considering, XYM would actually help us understand this topic more. And if this is something that you are interested in, I'm happy to discuss with this. I understand you're busy, but if you are interested, we can actually discuss this. So you have to bring something to the table. That is the point that I'm trying to make. So it's not all about sending an open message and be like, I just want to work with you, or I'm interested in your work. No. What is it that ignited your interest? Why do you want to work with the person? You understand what I'm trying to say? And once you are able to do that, it is likely that you are going to get a response. But however, even if you do that and you still did not get a response, it could be that sometimes, let's say your mail comes in on a Friday and the person you send the mail to is not on seat. And as a result of that, sorry about my voice. And as a result of that, maybe by Monday, the email has been pushed down. So it's not a bad idea for you to send a follow-up maybe after 1 or 2 weeks. But the point is that there must be something you bring to the table which would actually make that person to be interested in you. And I'll give you an example of this. When I was in Wyoming and I was looking for another postdoc opportunity, I came across a new professor I can't remember the school, but I came across her work. And what attracted me to that professor is that she she's working in the area of root traits, and that is something that I was working on too at Wyoming. Then, interestingly, my paper just came out at that time. Then I just emailed her, a very short email like, "Hello, Professor. I came across your work and I could see your lab focuses on, root traits. Here is the recent paper that I published in the same field where we show that, how root decomposition is influenced by, the traits of the root litter. And I'm interested in joining your lab as a postdoc. If you don't mind, we can actually discuss." And she responded to me, just that single email. She responded and she was like, "Oh, thanks for sharing your work. It looks interesting. We can actually, find some time to talk. Although I don't have an opening in my lab, I don't have the capacity to employ you, but it looks like you're doing a cool research, so we can let's connect and have some chat on Zoom." And we talked on Zoom. We later realized that, oh, we have a lot of things in common. We discussed on possible ways that we can work together. And interestingly, we also met at the last conference in Baltimore. So that's a network that I've built. Interestingly, have I been able to work with her? No. But does she know that I exist now? Yes, she does. You understand? So, things like that. So you must be able to show what is the value you are bringing to the table. So when the value you are bringing to the table is very clear, then it makes it easy for you to connect. There's another leading researcher in the field, which myself and a colleague in my lab were able to invite to our lab meeting very recently. You understand? I also met him I've read a lot of papers about him. And interestingly, I also met him at a conference. Those are places where you can also initiate conversations. And I walk up to him, "Oh, I work in this lab. This is the kind of work I do." You want to come with a value. You don't just want to come like a parasite who is just, around to kind of gain some benefit without bringing anything to the table. But when the relationship potentially looks like it's going to be mutual, you are likely to get attention. I hope I'm able to provide some answers to your question, Mr. Ravi.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I think I saw someone raise up his hand before. Looks like he's dropped now. Okay, Mr. Olari, why don't you please go ahead?
Thanks for the short introductory messages you sent, and it really resonated with my experience also when I wanted to publish my first paper. Also, I thought maybe I did a very good experiment, and I had, though their collaborators, they are my advisors and co, but I think I didn't get a good collaborations from them to advise me well, because I was like, I did a very good job, so I must target a very high paper and submit it. Whereas that was my expectation, whereas it was rejected so many times, and unfortunately, I later published it in a pediatric journal, which was very painful to me, and it was very painful, wasting the energy, wasting the resources, and wasting that kind of paper, which I can't even really put on my profile. So I think it's very good we also get good mentors and good collaborations to also be um, to also guide us in that regard. But from my experience in that from that first paper, I shoot high to submit and publish it in high paper. And how do we balance this, not to having this quiet paper and you having that conviction that this is a very good paper and this is a good work which I have done? How will not shoot yourself in targeting a very high paper or a very high journal, and later on maybe it has been rejected by one of the high paper which you targeted? How will not shoot yourself by submitting it to a low paper? Maybe how to balance the quality of what you did and selecting a good paper that fits that quality of paper. Because sometimes when we check journals, we see that this is almost similar to my work, which has been published in this particular paper. Why is mine rejected? So how do you balance that kind of situation? Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's a very important question. But first of all, thank you for your contribution. I I had a similar, experience with that predatory journal, but interestingly, I was able to, tell them not to go ahead with the publication. And I'll quickly share that story before I answer your question. So when I published my first ever journal article, I believe that was in an Elsevier journal in 2017. I was in Nigeria then. So shortly after that publication, different predatory journals started sending me emails. I should come and publish with them. But, as naive as I was then, I thought I didn't know about predatory journal. Nobody, gave me any insight about that. So I submitted my second paper to that journal. And about 2 or 3 days later, they just sent me an acceptance letter. And that was where I started suspecting that something is wrong. Because the first paper I published in the Elsevier journal took me maybe almost 6 months or more. You understand? Then the review was very comprehensive. I needed to go do more reading, and so it involves a lot of hard work. So now they coming back and giving me acceptance in 2 days. That makes me feel like, no, something must be wrong. So that was when I started digging and digging and digging, and later realized that, oh, this journal is actually a predatory journal. Then I, kind of sent them a mail that I'm not interested in the publication again. Initially, they told me to pay maybe 1,700 or something. I can't remember the amount to publish, in their journal. Then after they saw that I decided I don't want to publish again, they said, okay, no, this time, okay, you don't need to pay again. We'll just publish it for free. Then I said, no. And I do let them know that you cannot go ahead to publish my work without my consent. And that really saved my ass, by not, publishing in that journal. So as an early career researcher, it's important that we try to understand, which journal to submit our papers to. And that is where the advantage of having a mentor, also comes in, because if you have a mentor, you would be able to get guidance on where you should consider for your work. And also, when you write your own paper and you cite others too, you should also try to look at which journals are the journals you are citing. Those can actually be a potential journal outlet for your work. So regarding your question, it's a very important thing, and it's always good for you to be able to identify which of your work you should actually push to a very big journal and which one you should probably decide to go for maybe a lower level journal. Now, I don't think it's a possibility that every work that a researcher publishes is always in science, because also you have to diversify your publication. So once you identify, one of the ways to identify whether your work is suitable for a very big journal is, does it actually contribute to the leading edge of research in your field? And what do I mean by the leading edge of research in your field? What is the latest trend in your research field? What is it that is being hotly debated in your field? Those are the leading edges. So if your work actually contributes to that, that is perfect. Then you can decide that, oh, this work should go to a very big journal. Another thing you can use to identify is how interesting and strong is your results. You understand? So, or maybe if your work actually challenges the status quo, maybe it challenges something that is already known in your field, then you see that, oh, you need to actually push this to a very big journal. But you also need to understand that being able to get published requires that you come with a thick skin. And what do I mean by that? Rejection or acceptance is not certain. I've co-authored a paper recently where we even sent a pre-submission inquiry to the journal, and they said, yes, go ahead, submit your paper. And we submitted, and the paper was rejected. One would think that because we already sent a pre-submission inquiry and they said we should go ahead to submit, that should probably signal that the paper would get a chance to at least go for peer review. But when we submitted the paper, that was not the case. So that comes along. So the good practice is for you to itemize at least, let's say, 3 to 5 or even say 7 journals you want to go for. Then you can now categorize. Maybe the first 3 will be in the Q1 category. Excuse me, maybe the next 2 will be in the Q2 category. Maybe the next one will be like in the maybe Q3 category. You understand? So it's always important so that you already have a plan, an outline of, okay, until I exhaust all these journal lists, that is when I'm going to try to see if I can send my paper elsewhere. So practically, let's say you have completed your paper, you have like 3 Q1 journals you want to submit to. when you submit to the first Q1 journal, what response did you get? So whatever response you get, you have to make sure that you actually implement those suggestions before you go ahead to submit to another journal. If that is not the case, you may just be kind of running around. So when you submit to a journal and you get a feedback, try to go through that feedback and implement it in your work before you actually submit it to another place. Sometimes some people will feel like, I don't have to, worry about this feedback since I'm not returning this paper back to the same journal. Yes, even though you are not returning your paper back to the same journal, it is important that you consider those feedback, at least any of them that you think is reasonable and you can implement. Try to implement them because they will help you improve the quality of your paper before you submit to another journal. But after you try a bunch of high impact journals and it looks like your paper is not getting a chance, before you actually probably move from Q1 to Q2, one other thing you might want to do is to maybe look for a colleague or who is an expert in the field who can also help you go through the paper and give you some additional feedback. And you can also provide context, like I've been trying to push this paper to, this Q1 journal, but this and this journal, but they keep on, giving me rejection. So if you can help me look at it and, give me some feedback, that feedback can be very helpful. And I'll quickly relate an experience I have about this. My first PhD paper when I was in China, got bounced around a lot, maybe in a lot of journals. But I came across one editor while I was submitting, and that editor actually helped me out. And I think that editor was from Ecology and Society Journal. So that editor looked at my paper, looked at the data and everything, and he told me that you seem to have a good data, but if you want to make a very good publication from this paper, you should actually change the way you have analyzed the data. So the editor suggested to me an alternative way to analyze the data, which I accepted. I looked at it. I saw that it was reasonable. Then I used that approach to reanalyze the data. And that, don't forget, that means that I have to go back to the drawing table, and also change most of my writing. But I didn't consider that because I saw that the feedback was valuable. So I implemented the feedback and submitted. And the next place I submitted that paper to, it was considered and I was able to publish it there. So that is the importance of trying to make sure that when you get feedback, try to make use of it. It doesn't mean you have to take everything hook, line, and sinker, but you look at that feedback and see, which of these feedback is actually useful and which of them can I, implement to improve the quality of this paper. You understand? So one way is submit to high-ranking journals, but look at the feedback and implement them. But if you try several times with different journals and it's not working, try to seek expert feedback. If you try again after that, then you can you can now consider, maybe the next level of journals, maybe in the Q2 category. Then sometimes too, the way we write may be a barrier for us to be able to, get published in those high-ranking journals. So if you want to publish in high-ranking journals, I will say that try to pick a bunch of papers published in that journal and read them. Look at the way arguments are structured. And most of these high-ranking journals are usually limited in terms of space and number of words. And that is one skill that we also have to learn. So you need to look at it and see how papers in that journal are published, in those journals are published rather. Then you can use that, knowledge to be able to develop your own paper too. Imagine I once wrote a paper to a journal where it's a research paper, complete research paper, and the maximum number of words is 5,000. Normally when you write an article, you are probably expected to have maybe give or less around 8,000. Now imagine that you have to compress an 8,000 paper to 5,000. That's a lot of work. So you need a lot of skills to be able to communicate that same finding, in that target journal using a smaller, number of words. So that's another thing. So studying that is something that is very important. Then when you move down to the next level of journal, say Q2, you can also try a bunch of them before you move to the next level. And this is also why you don't have to focus on just one research. You understand? As you are doing that, you probably have, other other type of research, to work on, so that you don't get bored, because it can be boring sometimes. Mostly every time I get a very good review, I get bored, almost immediately. Then I have to leave it maybe for 3, 5, 7 days and come back to it before I start addressing them. I hope I'm able to answer your question.
Yes, Doc. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Do we have next question, please? Yeah, Mr. Bashir, please go ahead.
So there's often pressure to optimize visibility metrics like publication count or impact factor, citations, or how much dollars you use for your research. Looking at your own body of work and the KPIs across the published papers, what do you think contributed to your long-term academic credibility and career progression? Do people look at citation counts, or what should you focus on, especially as an early career researcher?
Thank you, Mr. Bashir. That's an important question. Well, as an early career researcher, I strongly feel that you should probably not be chasing citations. Citations will come when you do a very great job. Now, what should matter to you most is what is the level of quality of the work you are doing. And, you'll probably see this, or this will be reflected, in the kind of lab you work in as well. Some labs, you probably have pressure to be like, you have to publish this, you have to publish that. But some PIs will just be like, you don't have to be in a rush to publish, but just make sure that you have a very good and quality work. Now, let's take, for instance, if you have a single paper in a high-ranking journal, in your field, versus if you have, let's say, 5 different papers in, very low-ranking journals in your field. Again, this is relative. Some journals have been existing for years, and while it is true that they probably don't have very high impact factor, they are well respected in the field. So you don't have to always base quality on the fact that a journal doesn't have high impact factor. You understand? I once had a conversation with a supposed mentor at some point, and it was like, whatever journal that I read, that I get valuable information from, is high ranking in my own view. So it doesn't have to be like the journal must have a high impact factor. Even if the impact factor is, 2 point something, 1 point something, but every time I read that papers from that journal, I get useful, information that is able to, add to my knowledge in the field, and that journal is valuable. So that is something we also must bear in mind. So um, so when you want to publish your work, you don't have to, always consider that a journal has to have very high impact factor. Yes, it's not a bad idea, but you also need to consider that that impact factor is not actually the product of just one paper. It's the product of, like all the papers that have been published in that journal. So, but when it comes to your own paper, your own work, you want to be able to publish it in a place where it will get wide readership. That is one thing you want to consider. So the quality over quantity is something that is important. Quality over quantity. So when you have a great paper in 1 or 2 high-ranking journals, it's likely to, land you a lot of opportunities as well. Compared to when you have several papers, but there are always journals that doesn't even have visibility, or journals that are not even well known. So you want to avoid that. So as an early career researcher, please consider publishing your work in journals that are well known in the field, irrespective of impact factor. Impact factor is great, but that should not only be your criteria. And I think there's increasing call now to kind of consider other metrics in academia, and not just base everything on impact factor or citation count. I've even seen some PIs that will be like, now when they even prepare slides, they don't put the name of the journals when they provide citations, just to kind of neutralize all those things and share and push forward the idea that it is the knowledge that is generated in those articles that matters, not actually, not actually the journal. Of course, there's a lot of divides on this, but for me, I feel like, quality, comes first more than quantity. So don't always be in a race like you want to publish, 10 papers in a year. And if you, and one thing I've also come to realize is that creating knowledge, or developing or writing papers that will make impact takes time. It's not something that you go and say, okay, you have finished in 2 months, in 3 months. You have been able to write a paper that is well thought out, deeply researched and things like that. You'll all agree with me that that is probably very far from being possible, especially if you are working on a solo level. And if you are working in collaboration, it is very unlikely that everybody will just be available at the same time. So that time variability would also likely extend the time it takes to, create knowledge and be able to come up with something that is very tangible. So in a nutshell, considering, quality over quantity is very important. Thank you. Abdurrahman, I noticed you raised up your hand before you drop.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I actually had a network glitch. Yeah, thank you so much for this session. Yeah, my question is that as an early career scientist, how do you deal with imposter syndrome?
That's an important question. And I think we have all been there. There's no way you want to claim that you've never had imposter, at one point or the other. So, and I think there are different approaches to kind of address this issue. So number one is that when you feel imposter, you need to step back a little bit and try to look at where you are coming from. For example, let's say someone just get an admission in to study a master's or PhD, and probably relocated to a new country. On getting there, then they started feeling like, oh, I don't think I'm actually a good fit here. I don't think I'll be able to make it here. I don't think I'll be able to complete this program. I think it is important to step back first and look at, okay, what is my background? Where am I coming from? Okay, I actually had my primary, secondary, and first degree education, and I was able to come out with good grades. Then that should tell the person like, okay, what is different now than before? Probably the environment is different. Okay, so I probably need to learn about how to adapt to this environment. What again is different? Probably the depth or rigor of work that is going to be required is different. So I also need to develop a way to make sure that whatever rigor I have here, I'll be able to fit in. So addressing this issue in a retrospect manner can actually be very helpful. So when you look at your past and how you have been making progress over time, I think you can use that as a means of motivating yourself that you can actually do more moving forward. That is number one. Number two is that this is one area where mentorship can also be very helpful. So imagine that you find yourself in that situation and you have one or two mentors that you are able to talk to. Sometimes, people are able to bring out the best in you. And I'll give you a typical example. During my undergraduate days in my first year, I never aimed that I want to, like get a first class or anything like that. But I was lucky to stay with, how do I call them? Foster parents who are academic. And then immediately I got my first result in the first semester, they started letting me know that, hey, guy, it looks like you have this talent and you just have to bring it out in you. But I was just like, I just wanted to go to school. I don't know what you are all talking about. But they took it upon themselves to make sure they let me see that, no, you actually have this talent and you have to develop it and you have to, keep working hard and you'll be able to make it. And, it eventually happened. That is one way mentorship can be very, useful. Sometimes people around you see some values in you that you might not be able to see in yourself. So your ability to speak up, your ability to open up to your mentors can actually be very, very helpful. So in that situation, if you open up to one or two mentors, I'm sure they will be able to guide you by encouraging you that, okay, what are the challenges that you probably identified? What are the things you perceive as the stumbling blocks that you think would make you not to be able to be a good fit in that lab or in whatever you are doing? And once you are able to, together identify the problem, you would be able to both move forward with it. So imposter syndrome is something that is common, and I think it can happen at any career stage. But when it happens, number one, look back in retrospect, look at where you're coming from. Use that to motivate yourself and prepare yourself into the future. That's one. Number two, try and open up to a few mentors. It can even be your peers whom you know that they're interested in your progress. So try and open up to a few people around you and harvest their thoughts about how you can, conveniently and sustainably move forward. That would be very helpful. Then number three, depending on the context, it may also be helpful if you are able to talk to whoever is in charge of your, how do I put it now? Let's say, for example, you're a student. So, talking to your PI about it may also be helpful, at least in some instances. You understand? Letting them know that, oh, you actually feel this way and that, the fact that they run the lab, they might be able to give you some tips that will really be helpful for you. Then another option is for you to probably speak with some people you that are your senior in the lab. So, when you talk to people that are your senior in the lab, how have you been coping? How are you managing stress? How are you able to fit into the lab? They would be able to, explain to you, narrate their story to you. And from those stories, you can actually be able to develop an adaptation mechanism that will really be helpful for you to navigate whatever situation you are having. But more importantly, you must be able to identify what the challenge you have. What is the challenge that you have? You understand? So once you're able to identify the challenges, then it becomes easy to disentangle each of those challenges and try to find a way to address each of them one after the other. Then where mentorship also stands out regards this is that, let's say you identify 3 or 4 challenges, and maybe the first one you have been able to address it. You need to circle back to your mentors, give them updates when you discuss, the idea that somebody is letting you know that you are actually making substantial progress can actually be very motivating for you as well. You understand? Rather than keeping everything to yourself and, because sometimes we feel like we are not making progress because our progress is slow. And that is probably not the case. And I'll give you an example of our daily routine every day. Every day you go to work, you are not likely to have the same productivity every day. But it doesn't mean that you are not making progress every day. So using positive psychology to make sure that we keep pushing ourselves forward is actually very important. And sometimes, having those kind of support from the community can also be very helpful. By community here, I mean the mentors that you are working with. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome. Yeah, Mr. Wahid, please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I have one or two questions. Please, I want you to share your experience on how you are able to navigate between learning language in China and coping with the academic program there. Because it seems sometimes I used to face some challenges there. Sometimes my head will just be blank. Sometimes that
So where are you currently?
I'm in Brazil now. Because we have to learn Portuguese language, and it's not that you have to learn for a year, then enroll properly into the academic program. Everything is concurrent. So copying in the class, sometimes you'll be picking words. It is not even about the content. You are struggling to get some words. You are as if you are even learning the language during the class. So that is quite challenging. So I want you to help us share how can we cope in such a situation. Then sometimes I have some papers which are agronomic paper. I'm specializing in pasture and ruminant nutrition. So sometimes there are some works, the projects that have been done, but usually short-term agronomic works. So, passing through rigor of review in high impact journals has been a very difficult task, because sometimes they will say it has to be maybe 2 seasons, maybe 2 different sites or something like that. That has to be a long-term research. So it has been challenging to get them published in a high-ranking journal, and that is discouraging. Then, how can we monetize our research? Because when we are talking of impact factor, I believe, what impact does your paper has in the community and the impact it has in your own life is part of what we're supposed to term. That's, to me, is what's supposed to be termed as impact factor. For example, you publish a paper or you carry out a research. How can you monetize that particular research apart from publication? Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Dr. Bello, can you hear me? Are you there? Okay. It looks like he dropped. All right. I just wanted to alert him that he might also want to add to my response on the language issue, because I know he has also studied elsewhere where he needed to learn language. So number one, concerning the issue of language, I can understand your frustration. Honestly, I understand what you feel. It's not easy for you to be studying and also learning a different language, concurrently. However, I think one of the things that helped me during our own time is that it looks like my own structure, the structure in my own school is kind of different from yours. We were also doing it concurrently, but the only difference for us is that during that time, we were not doing research. So we were only doing coursework. So it was, only coursework plus the language. So I wouldn't know if that is the case in your own, in your school as well. So we're doing coursework, we're also doing language.
It's the same structure. Coursework, language.
Okay, good. Now, the fact that you are not doing research makes it a little bit lighter. Now, how can you cope with all this? Number one is that, are you interested in that language yourself? Because if you are not interested in the language, it will just be like you probably take a horse to the river and you're trying to force that horse to drink water. You can't force it to drink water. So if you are not interested in the language yourself, that is number one barrier that will probably not allow you to comprehend it. So now, how are you seeing the language? Are you seeing it from the perspective of, they just want me to learn this language, that is why I'm learning it? Or you are seeing it from the perspective of, oh, if I actually understand this language, it can be helpful for me in the future. And for me, I actually chose the second option during that time, because I felt like, oh, if I'm able to, speak the language, it will probably be useful for me, later in the future. And as a result of that, I became interested in learning the language. Was it easy? No. But how did I cope? One of the ways I cope is that anytime I go to buy something outside, everything I learn in class, I always want to practice it when I go to the market. And you know what? When I get to the market, people will laugh at me. But I don't care. I don't mind they laughing at me. But they are also impressed that I'm trying to speak the local language. You understand? So as a result of that, even though I would probably feel like what I've taken from the class is correct, when I get to the market, the market people will tell me, oh, that is not how to, that is not how to pronounce it. This is how to pronounce it. Then I get the correction that way. It sticks to my head. It's different from taking that from class as well. I'll get the correction from that person and it sticks to my head. Tomorrow when I come to buy the same thing, I'll make sure I repeat or I try that thing again. Then it sticks. My first 6 months when I was learning the Mandarin language, I was so fluent, very, very good. You understand? And that is the strategy I use. I try to communicate. Even when I see people, I don't know them. You understand? But mere the fact that if I just give them hello and they answer me hello, if they give me attention, I will make sure I use what I understand to speak with them. Then they will tell me something else. So when it gets to the level that I don't understand, I can easily tell them, I didn't get that one that you just said. What did you say and what does it mean? They will tell me, then I pick it. So that's the way I started picking the language, here and there, one after the other, one after the other. You understand? And it became better. So I think for you, that is one approach you can actually use too. Like if you are the type that don't mix up with the locals, you probably need to, do it. You understand? But that also depends on your environment. But that is one thing that can be very helpful. Karim Yusuf, I can see your hand. I'll come to you, please. So, but that is one thing that can be very helpful. You understand? So when you mix with the locals, try to make friends with them, talk to them. They will laugh at you. You understand? It's just like somebody that comes to your country too to learn. They will laugh. There was a day in my former life, there was a day I told my advisor that, oh, there's something called Pidgin English. He looked at me and I was like, Pidgin English? I was like, yes. But interestingly, only one person in my lab have heard about it before. And that was how I taught them in my lab. Like, alpha. You understand? My supervisor will be like, what do I mean by alpha? I'll tell him, oh, okay, so in Pidgin English, it means how are you? So instead of me saying how are you, we don't like that stress. We don't want to disturb ourselves with all the grammar. We'll just say, alpha or how you did. You understand? And he now said, okay, so what do you now say when you say that? And I said, I did. Again, he looked at me and like, I did. I said, yeah, that is Pidgin. That is much more easier for us to communicate. You get what I'm trying to say? So try to mix with the locals, converse with them, in that process, then everything you learn, don't just keep it, practice it. This is language. The more you speak it, the better you become. And I think probably the only language you are not likely to forget is probably the one you learn during your childhood. But when you are already grown up, you have to keep practicing. Like now, if you ask me to speak Mandarin now, I can't really speak very well again. Why? Because I've not been conversing with people again. But if I've been conversing with people continuously, I will still be able to, speak the language very well. It looks like Emmanuel Kofi has some addition to that. Please come on. Mr. Emmanuel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So I was muted, but thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. For me, I want to find out. It's a question I have, because I think that for the language aspect, we're all going through that, and I think you just nail it down.
Actually, you want to ask a question, right, Mr. Emmanuel?
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry, before you go ahead, Mr. White, can you check the chat box? Mr. Kafar actually dropped a response there to which I think is very helpful. Thank you. Please go ahead, Emmanuel.
All right, Doc, thank you. So I want to find out, as a student, we work with time.
Emmanuel,
Doc,
sorry, I just realized I have not completed this question. Can you please allow me to quickly finish it? I just realized he asked like 2 questions. Sorry, Emmanuel. Yeah. So the second question you asked has to do with trying to publish in high-ranking journal and you getting rejected over time. I said something about this earlier as well. For you to publish in high-ranking journals, try and pick up some articles published in those journals. Read the articles. What do they report? How are the reports, presented? Now, if you have ever seen, I also experienced this, while I was trying to publish in high-ranking journals when I was in Nigeria. And when you submit data for 1 year, they will tell you no. And you know what they are trying to tell you is that if you submit data for 1 year in agronomy, you don't probably have the statistical power or the strength to be able to generalize that findings. So because of that, they don't want to go ahead and publish that kind of work. So if you want to publish with them, they will tell you at least give us 2 years data or 3 years data. And I don't think there's a shortcut to that. That is a bar that they have set for the journal, which in most cases, they will not lower the bar because of, probably anything. So for you to publish in those kind of journal, then you have to make sure that you have the type of data they require. And that has to do with the robustness of your research. Sometimes it's not even about the robustness. Sometimes it's about the experimental design. You understand? So those are some of the things that you have to look into those, the papers from those journals critically so you can understand some of the type of work that they publish. Then you'll be able to judge yourself and see that, oh, is my work actually relevant, to this journal? And lastly, to your question about how do we monetize research, I'm also interested in that knowledge. But one way I know presently is when you get patent. If you do a research that actually leads to patent, I believe there should be some royalty that you probably get in that through that pathway. But I don't really know much about that for now. But I think that is something that is that is also useful. And I've also seen a couple of PIs that start maybe some kind of organization, or maybe non-profit or things like that. But I still don't really understand that landscape very well yet to kind of speak authoritatively in that area. But if we have anybody who has more insights among us, please feel free to share your knowledge on this. Yeah, Mr. Emmanuel, please go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. So as a student, my work, for example, I have to develop a method or optimize a method quantified using high number of assertions. So by the time you get to the lab to start your lab work, more or less in our institute, university here, as you are aware, first 6 months is gone. I get to the lab, I have to use more or less 1 year to develop my method. So I'm into the second year like that. And you have about 5,000 genotypes to quantify before you do that phenotypic, get the phenotypic work done, go to data analysis. Before you get something to write, more or less your 4 years is due. So at that stage, and you are supposed to graduate. And we've also seen that if you want to publish in these good journals, the review alone takes more or less 6 months. Currently, there's a senior in my lab who submitted his work almost 6 months now, and I got back to him some few days ago. So 6 months, and the time might not be there. So at that point, will you advise that you come lower and make your time graduate? Maybe when you have the time to yourself in the future, like endeavor, then you start looking at those high ones. That's the first one I want to get from you. And I also want to find out, so how do I identify those good journals within my field? And I've also experienced that, especially in China here, there are some journals people don't value them. For example, these Frontiers and MDPI journals, but I've seen papers published in US and Canada, those same journals, but here it seems like people are looking down upon them. So I don't know what's your take on that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, firstly, the timing of research is different, across different fields, and that we probably cannot control that in any way. But having said that, I think one thing you need to understand right from onset, and that is why when you start a program, maybe you're starting a master's or you're starting a PhD, it is critical and very important to have this meeting with your PI to know what is expected of you. What are the expectations? What do I need to do to graduate? What are my responsibilities? So when you know all this, it helps you to plan yourself ahead of time. Now, imagine that you have to publish 1 or 2 papers before you graduate. Then you also need to ask, don't just ask like, do you need to publish? The papers I need to publish, do they have to be research papers, or I can also publish review papers to graduate? So if you can publish review papers to graduate, that makes it a little bit easy. But it doesn't mean that it is going to come that easy as much as I, kind of present it, because writing a very good review to get it published is also a lot of work. And that is why you see that some journals only invite reviews from leading experts that are already established in the field. So asking these critical questions is very important. Now, once you are able to ask, these questions, then the next thing will be that, okay, now you know that you need to publish. And given the nature of your work, it takes this length of years. Is it possible for you to actually publish the work along the way? Something like a preliminary studies or preliminary findings. Those are conversations you should have with your supervisor. like, okay, this is a 4-year work. If we get data for 2 years, can we, is it possible to go ahead and publish this as a preliminary findings, or do we have to wait, until all this work is completed? Now, if you have to wait till all the work is completed, you probably want to, consider other means or other ways that you can, publish a work. And one of the other ways is, do you find a significant gap in your field that you can actually fill using maybe a review or meta-analysis approach? That is one angle. The other one is will your advisor be open to doing a parallel experiment that is not going to be as time consuming as the other one, so that at least you can probably use that one as a criteria for graduation, while you focus more on the long-term one and not mind the time that you're going to complete that one. So these are some of the conversations you need to have with your advisor, and you have to be open and honest with it. So if you explore some of these approaches, it is very likely that you'll be able to find a way, to be able to get what you actually need to graduate. Do you get what I'm trying to say? But relying on that research alone, might not even be a good idea as a PhD student, because you need to learn how to collaborate as well. I understand it's going to be tedious. I have a friend during my time when I was doing PhD. Sometimes he comes back at night, he was doing this CRISPR-Cas9, kind of research. He's also a breeder. So I understand it can be very time consuming. But does it mean he was not also collaborating? No. Do you understand? So, and this is something you have to build into it right from onset. So once you know about the information that you're supposed to know from onset, you have a clear path with your supervisor right from onset, everybody's on the same page. And it makes it easy for you to design, a way that you want to do from the start to the completion of your program, that would actually make things at least achievable for you, in the long run. Because even if you find out that means you submit a meta-analysis, it's even increasingly difficult to get reviewers these days. So even if you're able to finish on time and you submit your paper, what is the probability that you get response from the journals as early as you anticipate? So that is another thing that you have to consider. So I think looking for alternative approaches that you can actually contribute to the literature might be a good way or a good alternative for you to see, to be able to get what you actually need to graduate. I hope that helps.
Yeah, but I think that's an aspect of the question I asked.
Okay. What's the second aspect, sir?
The second one was like, how do I identify a good journal within my field?
Well, identifying good journals in your field, I think it's pretty much kind of easy. Number one, what journals do you know that when you read them, you get good information, like you get inspired to be a researcher, or you feel like, oh, this is good science. There are some papers you read like that you feel like, oh, this is a very good work. You understand? Then you also probably want to look at, you can just do a random search to see what is the leading edge of research in your field. If you identify the leading edge of research in your field, you can, do a search to see what papers have been published, in those areas. But I think nowadays it's kind of easy to at least pinpoint a few journals and be like, oh, these journals are, they are in the good standing in my field. For example, I think there are a lot of ranking systems that you can potentially use, even though you might not want to rely on them 100%. But if you look at the list of journals, you see some categorized as Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. So that can give you an insight on, what kind of, journal is this. Then you can also look at, potentially how well, this has to do with also, so that might not work. You can also discuss with your advisor and be like, oh, what journals do you actually like? I once asked my former advisor this question, like, what journals do you like publishing in? Because I know he's a well-known, researcher worldwide. And he told me, he mentioned some journals to me, like, okay, journal A, I like this journal, I like this journal, I like this journal. And interestingly, those journals you mentioned to me don't have impact factor of 50 or 20. Do you understand? So which means that, like it also boils down to what I said earlier. Quality has to do with, are you getting good output? Are you getting good information from these journals when you read them? There are some journals like that. Maybe they've even been existing for 50 years, 70 years, 80 years. But for one reason or the other, they don't have very high impact factor. But they are well respected in the field. You understand? So, and one way to identify, some of those journals is also to talk to colleagues. Like, oh, which journals do you, normally publish in? Like, if you have your work, what kind of journals do you, do you prefer to submit to? And these are random questions you can also probably ask experts. Maybe somebody come to present a seminar in your, in your lab or in your department. You can get into conversation with them and, briefly ask like, oh, do you mind if I ask, some of the journals you think are very good in this field, So you start harvesting responses like that. Then you also match it with whatever, kind of papers you are reading from those periodicals to, to be sure that, oh, those journals are actually very good. Yeah, then you also talk about something like, some journals are reputed in some countries and not. I think that is something that we have to live with. There's different context in different places. So you also want to make sure that you don't put all your efforts in a journal that is probably not regarded as a good journal, in the country where you are working. So that is something you also want to be, wary of. So which means you have to also seek local information about that. If there's a local, yardstick or standard that they use, you need to make sure that you are conversant with that and you are able to use it as a guiding, principle to know where you want to publish your work.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, before I call Abiola, Karim Yusuf, do you still have a question? Karim Yusuf, I noticed you raised your hand earlier.
Hello, Doc.
Do you still have a question, please?
Not a question. It was when, I don't know, Mr. Emmanuel, when he was talking about language, because I'm also in the same situation. So I only wanted to encourage him so that I can also encourage myself, since we are also learning the same language.
Oh, okay.
So the only, and I think I'm doing it as if my life depends on it, and it has really been assisting me.
All right. Thank you for that insight. All right. Abiola Aziz, can you ask your question? I'm not sure we have others. That will probably be our last question. Abiola Aziz, please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the wonderful section, Prof. Although this is my first time and I appreciate the opportunity for this section, it's so wholesome. I could learn from other scholars in the section. So my question is, you've been in this field quite numbers of years. You have worked with a couple of researchers, even when you were in your previous university in China and US. So I just want to ask about your experience about quiet quitting. So, as early researcher or early scientist that you are working on a particular project, I came in when you were talking about imposter, and though they were quite similar with quiet quitting. But what I mean by that is you are working on a particular project that has a deadline or due date with your professor, and you meet twice with your professor in a week. You talk about the research even with your team, but you are the lubricant behind the project. You are the one making so much effort, but you are not getting enough. Just like a parent who the kids are doing very well in school or in the madrasa, and such a kid is not receiving the reward that is expected of him or her from the parent. My dad's supposed to buy me biscuit for taking first position in my class, or at some point, you're just going to feel like maybe you're not doing good. So how do you tackle that, such a scenario?
Okay. Just a minute. Yeah. So how do you address that kind of question? I think motivation is something that is very important. As human beings, we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where you keep working and it looks like nobody even noticed that you're working. Those things I think are very counterproductive because like the term you use, quiet quitting, I think I'm probably hearing that for the first time, but that can actually lead, many people to feel like since nobody's seeing me or since, it doesn't look like I'm doing anything, I'm just gonna quit. So I think in that instance, you need to study who you are working with, number one. Then number two, is the person approachable? If your answer is a big yes, then you need to approach the person and try to, um, you know, talk to them and ask them like, are you actually delivering the expected results? So that it doesn't be a case, so that it will not be a case where you actually think you are meeting the performance metrics, but maybe your effort is directed in part A, but the advisor is probably expecting your effort to be directed to part B. And you feel like, yeah, it is progress, but it's actually not progress. So open communication is very important. So I encourage meeting with the person, discussing in an open manner, like, is everything going all right? What are the things that, that I'm doing that is probably wrong? Or is everything I'm doing even in line with what is expected of me? I think that's a fundamental question you need to ask. So once you ask that question, hopefully you get a response that clarifies whether they are expecting you to do more or whether they are expecting you to do something different. And I think that is something that is, that would really be very helpful to know what is the next step that you are going to take. But, sitting down there and just keep grinding yourself and, everything just looks like nobody's noticing, nobody's even aware of anything. It's probably not going to, be very helpful, and it's probably not going to work out that way. So you need to be able to speak up and, ask them the question, am I doing what is expected? Is it that what I'm doing is kind of different from what I'm supposed to be doing? Or am I getting an output that is different from the anticipated or expected outcome, So a simple question like that would help you to clarify and get their own perspective about things. So you can even ask them, how do they measure good performance? You understand? Like, how do you measure good performance? But at the same time, as much as good performance is fine, it's something that we should all pursue. But caring about the wellness of whoever is working for you is something that is also very important, because it is when you care about people that they are also able to give their very best in whatever they are doing. So please ask question in that situation. Ask whoever is your next level supervisor or advisor, have a round discussion with them. What is it that they're actually expecting? Do you understand? And if it turns out to be like that is a norm, maybe the person doesn't, that's the way everybody is treated in the lab, you probably want to think twice on, what you probably need to do next. Provided you probably think that is not good for your own mental health. You understand? So, but having an open conversation will also clear some of the things that looks like an assumption from your own end, because you might be assuming wrongly. An assumption is, sometimes very deadly. You just assume something else and it's actually something else that is happening or something else that is implied. So please ask questions openly and be open as well. So when you learn about the situation, it's going to be very helpful for you to know the next step to take. I hope that is helpful.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, I want to sincerely thank everyone for staying with me until this time. I'm really sorry about the time, but now it's almost 1/4 an hour. So we're going to be rounding up here today, and hopefully next month we're going to meet again on the academic Q&A session 9, and I hope that you will also join the session so we can have an interactive session. I also strongly feel that we have been able to, learn one or two things and benefited from this session. And if that is the case, could you please use the react button to, kind of show what your perception is about the session for today. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I could, yeah, I can see those reactions. Thank you. So, we're going to be rounding up and stop here for today. So next month we're going to meet again for another session, the 009 session. And until then, thank you very much, and I'll see you next month.